Welcome, everybody, to the newest episode of A Better Conversation, a podcast hosted by A Better Dallas. As always, I'm your host, Chris Clement. We have joining us today, as always, the producer, Kyle Mason.
Yes, sir.
And today we actually have a special guest with us, Mr. David Blewett, who is running for the Dallas City Council in place number 6.
Place 6.
Place 6.
Yep.
So we've had a previous city council candidate, Jose Rivas, on with us. We've had past city council members on with us. David, thank you for joining us here today. You know, our audience, I'm sure, is interested to hear about your race, what's going on with the city of Dallas. But, you know, before we get started, Kyle, did you have any announcements you'd like to make?
We have the last podcast that we put out. I think everyone should go check it out. It was really in depth, kind of things that I haven't heard before, and I do listen to a lot of podcasts about politics, so that was very interesting just to be a part of, but also to re-listen to. And please share the show. If you enjoy this, shoot it over to a friend or family member that you think would enjoy this. It would just allow us to continue to grow and bring on more awesome guests.
Well, perfect. And speaking of awesome guests, David, nice tee up for you there.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us.
No, thank you for having me. Yeah, the awesome guest. I'll take that before I even say anything. So thank you. I appreciate it. It's nice to be here, and I'll answer your questions, make some statements, and I'm happy to get into it.
Well, I guess I'm glad that you're not just leaving now with the prize of being an awesome guest and not putting it at risk. But
just kind of retire at a high note, yeah.
Well, David, this isn't your first time running for office, but for a lot of people, it might be their first opportunity to vote for you. District 6 isn't, in Congressional District 32 or your previous city council spot. So if you would just sort of introduce yourself a little bit to our audience and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thank you. Happy to. My name is David Blewett. I grew up in the West, California, Arizona, Colorado. I was a football player. I came to Dallas to play football at SMU in 1984. So I'll tell you how old I am. I played 3 years. We had something called the death penalty for those of you who are SMU fans, and that kind of ended my football career. I decided I wasn't going pro, it wasn't good enough, and so I stayed at SMU, graduated with 2 degrees in 1989. Since then, I got married, had 7 kids, lived in East Dallas most of the time, but lived in Central Dallas and a variety of places over the last 35 years or so. And all of my kids have gone through public schools. I lived in the M Streets back in the day, just past Central and a little bit east of SMU. And that was back when they were expanding the Central Expressway, and a lot of crime was coming in from all the construction. And so I had little kids, and it got me involved in the Crime Watch. And that was my first little foray into politics. So I got on the Crime Watch board. And from there, I was appointed to a committee that helped do the Greenville Avenue Parade. If you remember how chaotic it was back in the late 90s, the city of Dallas wanted to shut it down. So I represented the M Streets in negotiating what they do now. They're still using the same permit that we did. That was my first appointed position by Mary Poss a long time ago. And then I got to know my city council person, Angela Hunt. She lived in the M Streets a couple blocks away from me, and she was termed out in 2013. And so I actually thought being on the Crime Watch board, being involved in all kinds of school committees and activities, that being on city council would be easy. So I ran in 2013. There were 7 of us that ran. I really just kind of threw my hat in I didn't understand city politics as much as I thought I did. I came in 4th, and the handpicked person, Philip Kingston, of Angela Hunt, won that seat. I subsequently got to know him fairly well because he was my councilman. And we used to meet periodically and talk about different things. In 2019, if you all remember what was happening in Dallas, there was a lot of chaos. The city council was broken. There were fights between the mayor and different councilmen. And Philip was largely leading that. I met him for coffee at a coffee shop on Greenville Avenue. And it was a catalyst for me. I said, Philip, you're fighting with everybody and nothing's getting done. I mean, why don't you just try and find 8 votes? I mean, that's the game. You want to get something done in the city of Dallas with our 14-1 system, you have to have 8 votes. And he goes, Dave, that is not how it works. You have to pick fights. You have to push because otherwise nothing gets done. And I just completely disagreed. I'm an old sales guy. I'm a guy who's looking for votes. I'm looking for friends. I'm looking to have things that you can get done. And what I've learned in a diverse thing like the city of Dallas, or even on other boards that I serve on, if you go in there with your way or the highway, it's very difficult to get anything done. You've got to find people that are open-minded, find common ground. So I said, Philip, I can't support you anymore. And I decided to run against him.
Hey, did you know a Better Conversations on social media? You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and X. Following us will not only keep you up to date on our latest podcast drops, but will also keep you informed on current events around DFW, including election news, volunteer opportunities, and social events like late cleanups on Saturday mornings or our happy hours throughout the month where you can meet like-minded people in a fun social setting. You can also meet local politicians and activists that are our guest speakers. Follow the links below to connect.
It was an interesting campaign in 2019, but I beat him. So then I get into council, and the first thing that I want to do is get to know everybody on council, because they're from all over the city. If people don't know how it really works, there's 14 single-member districts. Largely, 7 of them are south of I-30, 7 of them are north of I-30. There's a racial component to it. There's an economic component to it. And because of all that, the council is very diverse in every way. And I prided myself while I was there on saying, if I could find 8 votes, I don't care where they came from. So I was friendly with as many council people as I could. It was a quick, chaotic time, if y'all remember what happened in 19, 20, and 21, whether it was the Black Lives Matter protests that led into Dallas, and we had economic shutdowns, we had violence, we had protests, then we had COVID. So a lot of people forget, like, COVID came on that tail end of all this chaos. And we had, that was economic shutdown in District 14 was Uptown. It was the Arts District. It was Greenville Avenue. So we shut down restaurants, bars, downtown, all the businesses. Mm-hmm. We largely had 100,000 people every day commuting into downtown. That ended. That then led to all kinds of economic disruption. So it was a really chaotic time. The 2021 election was kind of a carryover of that. It was kind of leftover of the 2020 election. That's one of the weird things about some of these elections. So you'll have a November 2020 election, and the next election you have is a municipal election, May of 21. So you get whoever won is kind of energized, whoever lost is even more energized. And so 21 was actually a really interesting election. A lot of energy on the defund the police issue. So there were 3 of us that ran in 2021. And the issue became, and the council district became partisan. And they're not supposed to be partisan, because a lot of things that happen in the city of Dallas is, it's public safety, it's public infrastructure, it's quality of life. It's not a lot of things that have to do with red hats and blue hats. But that election became a red hat, blue hat election for a lot of different reasons. So I lost my reelection, and I went back about my life, raising my kids, running my business. I have a business. I sell flooring products to contractors, flippers, flooring stores. It's in West Dallas. It's in District 6. It's been there for about 10 years. So I've been working in District 6 for a long time, and I've been living over there for a little over a year. So I have experience on council. I have experience in neighborhood issues. I have experience in crime watch issues. I'm actually passionate about the public, the ability to get things done in local politics. I do love politics in general, but I really like the ability to get things done, and local gives you the chance to do that. So my name is David Blewett, and that's a long answer for why I'm running and who I am.
No, that's great. And I love that, because there's lots to unpack about that answer.
Yeah,
so
you got me.
First let's start on more of the personal end, and then we'll get more into the city council stuff. So sure. You came out to SMU for football. What was it that attracted you about coming out to Dallas and SMU in the first place?
For guys that are my age, Dallas in the 80s, was called Big D, and we had everything Cowboys and Dallas TV show, and it was big hats and big cars and big everything. Sweet. And I came down here for a recruiting visit, and I went to a high school in Denver called Cherry Creek, and we were pretty good. We won state my junior year, won state my senior year, and I got recruited nationally by about a bunch of different schools. And I wanted to go to a private school that was a good football program. So I looked at Stanford, USC, and SMU, and I didn't get offered by USC or Stanford. SMU did offer me, and I came down for a visit and fell in love with Dallas, fell in love with the school, the town, the opportunity. So it was a good move in 84. And what kind of gets lost in 87 with the death penalty is Dallas in the late 80s changed. We had the S&L crisis, we had the banking crisis, we had a lot of things. A lot of my friends dropped out of SMU. They couldn't afford to stay if you're in the oil business, their parents were. So the late 80s was very different than the mid-early 80s. But still, going back in time, I would do it again. I had a great experience at SMU, good and bad, with football. But it changed my life, and I'm happy I did it.
So I see a picture on the wall back there. Is that
Yeah.
a linebacker stance, or where'd you play?
Well, they had all of us do the same kind of. You were at Texas Stadium, and they had all of us kind of run at the camera like we were fullbacks or something. But I was a defensive end, and then I think right over my head is the Letterman's. It's a Letterman's kind of a frame thing that they give you for doing that.
Excellent. So, being a local sports fan, are you a Cowboys fan?
Sorry, I'm going to lose votes, but no. I'm kind of a Broncos fan. It's still, I grew up with that. I knew Dan Reeves pretty well, who was the head coach of the Broncos back then, and he probably played a role in me going to SMU. He knew all the Dallas people, and my best friend dated his daughter, so it's kind of a weird thing. And also, what I have going for the Cowboys is they can't apparently win the Super Bowl, since 96. So you got to be a real believer to be a Cowboys fan these days.
Or delusional.
Delusional.
To kind of give it out there, we're recording here. It's April 1st, April Fool's Day. I posted on my social media that every year Jerry Jones makes April Fools out of all Cowboys fans.
Yeah. I mean, you got to love the Cowboys to stick with it because, the beginning of the season, all the optimism, and then it just kind of goes away.
Denver's a great place. I went to Denver this last fall for actually a football trip. So went to a Broncos game, and the fans there are great. Like very passionate, really into the game. Everybody cared. It was one of those where I think the Broncos came back in like the fourth quarter against the Chargers, and nobody left. Nobody bailed on them after the midway through the third quarter.
Yeah, it's funny. I came to Dallas, 84, and Dallas was, I would call it a 2-horse town, and Denver was a 1-horse town. And in the last 30 years, downtown Denver and Denver itself there's been a renaissance. It's not the same town that I left. And so it is interesting to go back. I have a friend, political friend, who's a councilman in downtown Denver. And I actually been in Denver to see what downtown was like during all the chaos. I identified myself with Denver police officers and said, hey, I'm a councilman. I've got downtown Dallas, trying to figure out what you guys get right or wrong, what we get right or wrong. And man, it's interesting to see the parallels between the problems they're facing with homelessness. They've done things with legalization of drugs, which just changed their downtown. And of course, we're fighting about it here in Dallas, trying to figure out what we're going to do. So it is interesting to go to these different cities and talk to councilmen and police and learn about what we can get right or get wrong.
Yeah. Denver definitely smells different than it used to when I was a kid.
Yeah, it's very different. Downtown is not what it used to be. And actually, Courtney Garrett, if people who know who she was, she used to run something in Dallas called Downtown Dallas. And it's the organization that kind of is privately funded to do homeless, trash, some crime issues. And the Denver has something, I think it's called the Denver Cooperative. It's a similar deal by all the businesses downtown. And she actually left a couple of years ago to run that up in Denver. And I keep in touch with her. And downtown Denver's in trouble, but she's doing a good job, and she did a great job at Dallas when she was here.
All right, so no on the Cowboys. Any other North Texas teams that you're rooting for? Or are you a Denver loyalist through and through?
Like I said, I grew up all over. I was born in California and Arizona. So high school and 8th grade or whatever in Denver. So I'm not like living and dying for Denver, but it was football when I kind of came of age. Other sports teams, been to a few Rangers games. I try and play baseball, with my sons, and I think it's more of a father-son thing than I go to opening game if I can. But other than that, not a huge North Texas fan. I much rather play than watch.
Okay, just literally for me, as long as you're not an Avalanche fan.
Avalanche, what's that?
Okay, good. All right, perfect. That's perfect. Okay, so you talked about sort of how Dallas changed and sort of what your involvement was when you were living in there in the M Streets. You talked specifically about being, Crime Watch, serving on boards, working with the Lower Greenville or the Greenville Avenue Parade, the St. Patrick's Day Parade. How did those sort of public service activities and being on those sort of boards and commissions, how did that help prepare you for being on the city council itself?
There are things that happen in life and you don't really know how it's going to play out. Like, for example, for me, the death penalty, I thought at the time at SMU, I thought was just terrible. I thought it was a life-changing event. I look back on it now and it probably was beneficial to me because it made me focus on, I got 2 degrees and I can walk, I can run, my knees don't hurt. I wonder if I got a few concussions or not, but I'm largely functional. And I think the same thing is true of like that St. Patrick's Day parade. I didn't know. And when I was in college, it was fun to go to, and I was part of the parade. And I remember it was chaos. Now I'm a homeowner and I've got little kids, and the chaos is getting a little dangerous. And I'm more on the public safety side than I am on the social side. And when I said I represented the M Streets, there were 6 neighborhoods that were represented in that city council commission to either kill the parade, reform it, figure out what we were going to do. So you had DPD, you had Dallas Fire Department, you had city officials, and you had restaurant and bar representatives. And then you had the 6 neighborhoods represented. And we all went into a room and we basically fought. And it was really eye-opening to see the city kind of step back and kind of watch the neighborhoods try and figure out if we could come up with an arrangement with the restaurants and bars and the parade organizers. And I would say that I was one of the people that led the ability to cut a deal with them. We came up with the idea of having it permitted. We came up with the idea of bringing in portalets and additional private police officers. We came up with the idea when it was permitted of having a limited time frame. It made the neighborhoods feel safer. It gave the restaurants and the bars the ability to do it, made them have some skin in the game, right? They couldn't just get the benefit of all the revenue without having to clean it up, without having to be responsible for the crime. And we cut that deal. And it's still, the evidence that it was a good deal is here it is 2025. We cut that deal, I think, in 2001. And they used the same permit every year that we negotiated with slight tweaks. They had a few more officers. They had a few more portalets, one-sided parking, different things like that. But it taught me how to go into a room with different people and cut a deal that worked for the betterment of everybody. And then I get on council and you do the same thing.
But so, I mean, it's almost like the romance of American, the American Republic and our democratic system is like, yeah, business owners and property owners and all these sort of people sit around and come together with a solution. Mm-hmm. How much, I guess, you talk about eventually the city council got more and more partisan. How much has the introduction of partisanship changed the ability to sit around a table and work out solutions?
Well, not every council district is as partisan as some. The ones that are partisan are the ones that are the most, I use the word friction sometimes, but when you have kind of disparate groups. But some of these council districts are pretty uniform in terms of demographics, in terms of economics. And so it's really one group kind of fights with another group for who's going to represent them. The partisanship really plays a role in, I'd have to think about the 14 districts, but probably 3 or 4 or 5 of them, max. And you try and stay out of it, because as soon as you put on a red hat or blue hat, you just lost some votes. It's just the way it is. So, but everybody knows what everybody is. I mean, it's kind of the dirty little secret of politics, right? You can say it's nonpartisan, but I get asked that all the time. Are you Republican or Democrat? And I don't like answering that question, because it's a terrible thing to say, because you immediately make a friend or make an enemy. You don't. When I was on city council, my argument was everybody cares about a pothole. Everybody cares when you call 911. Yeah. And if you really want to get into the partisan side of it, well, now you're picking winners and losers, and somebody is losing the city services that they deserve just like everybody else. So I actually believe the nonpartisan nature of local politics works better than the partisan nature. But everybody knows what everybody is.
So that's interesting. I'd like for you to kind of unpack that a little bit, because there seems to be a growing call for just doing away with nonpartisan races and just say, hey, since everybody already knows, let's just run these as partisan races like we do everything else. What would be your pushback to that?
It's a complex thing, because everybody says, oh, the municipal turnout is terrible. It's 3%, 5%. We got as high as 10 or 11%. Some districts really do have decent turnout, they engaged citizenry. But overall, it's about 5%. Maybe in a mayor's race, it might be a little bit more. And the argument is, if we just make it partisan and go to November, then you'll end up with 30% or 40%. So now you get a whole bunch more voters. Therefore, it's more democracy. Therefore, you get better representation. I don't see the proof of that, truthfully. What I think is, when you go to a November election and introduce partisanship to it, you're going to actually bring a lot more money into it. You're going to bring in outside interest groups. It's not as local as it used to be, because right now local people have skin in the game, but you put a red hat or blue hat on and it becomes statewide or national, and that's fine. But let's look at the demographics of the city of Dallas, or the partisan nature of it, or the county. It's 2-1. So honestly, if I actually like having Republicans and Democrats, but if you made it a November partisan race, it would be all Democrat.
What, you talk a little bit about, hey, if we have it in a November election, if we have it with all the others, you'll have a greater turnout. I guess a concern that I have, and Kyle, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this, is you might have a higher turnout in that election, but how many people that are turning out to vote are doing so with any sort of intent or any knowledge on the city council sort of races, as opposed to, oh, I'm here to vote for my senator, my congressman, the president, and the who the mayor is, who the city council members are, just kind of get shoved to the bottom of the ballot, and it's just another box to tick.
That's exactly what happens. I mean, people would go in and vote either all one way or all the other, and they might go all the way down ballot, or they might not. Depends. There's a lot of people that don't vote all the way down, but most of them do. But I can tell you, when you knock on doors as a councilman, as a council candidate, or to me, it's closer to a primary, because people who vote municipal, they may not be a huge number, but you do not find people that vote municipal who do not know what they're voting for. Municipal voters are really interesting voters, and it's something the Democrats understand a little bit better than the Republicans. But you have to understand that a municipal voter cares about their local neighborhood, cares about their local crime issues. They care about maybe dogs on the loose, code issues that is very personal. And if they don't have issues that they care about, it's really hard to get them to vote. So, I mean, people are trying to find issues that are going to get more people vote municipal, but you got to have, well, what is the issue that's going to make the guy who lives in the M Streets or Midway Hollow or whatever neighborhood it is, go vote for a national issue? I mean, it just changes the whole dynamic of what the race is. And I don't know that you'd be focused as much on the potholes if you're focusing on national issues. So I'm more and more a believer on local politics is about paying sales tax and property tax. It is about making sure the cops show up, make sure the potholes are filled, make sure you got a good quality of life, that the city is delivering services that matter. And if you want to go vote for how big the wall is, or if you want to vote for a war in Ukraine or whatever's going on in the Middle East, I just don't think it really plays a role in local politics.
Yeah, Chris, me and you have had this conversation a lot. And I've gone back and forth, but really this conversation's really pitching me. David, you're correct that when people show up to the local elections, municipal elections, they do know what they're voting for.
Know.
And
that's right.
As a poll worker myself, sometimes I had to help people, fill out ballots or read the ballots to them or whatever. And really, they don't really know they need to go vote in November, but like they don't really know the issues with the amendments and everything like that, or the propositions. But it actually does seem it's a lower turnout, but that's fine because the people that are showing up have a much deeper understanding of what is going on locally. And that is, I guess it's kind of the last bastion in our republic of not partisan politics. It really is just, like you said, everyone knows, but at the same time, hey, can we talk about the potholes? Can we talk about the safety? Can we talk about traffic flow? Really, could just be a really great starting point to kind of rebuild the system that just seems to be kind of grinding to a halt.
Yeah, I mean, I have people of all political flavors that voted for me in the past, because quite frankly, I was very responsive as a councilman, even when I was on different boards and commissions without being elected. I really believe that everybody deserves their voice to be heard. And so it sounds ridiculous, but you can go back and look at the 2019 election and how I won. And it was a race between me and Kingston. And it was also at the mayor's race, it was between Eric Johnson and Scott Griggs. And Scott Griggs was completely in alignment with Philip Kingston. I mean, those guys were attached at the hip. and I think it was the Dallas Morning News, or it might have been D Magazine, did a breakdown of the election. And the reason I won is the Scott Griggs voters broke for me, a lot of them. So it was really kind of weird. They split because they thought I'd be representative of them. They didn't lock me into some kind of a silo. That they voted based on what they believed I would do, listening to everybody, representing everybody. And that is what I think politics is about. And I think so many people are just tired of the yelling and screaming at each other and nothing getting done.
Yes.
So that's a good, I guess, a question that I would ask you to kind of help inform voters, right? Because I think voters, for the most part, they look at the R, the D, the red, or the blue when making their decisions, because that's sort of an easy proxy. Mm-hmm. But if you were to tell a voter, and maybe not try to be too self-serving on this, if you're telling a voter, hey, what should you be looking at to inform yourself on these candidates, what would you tell a voter to do?
The number one thing is make sure you have somebody that's open-minded and will listen to you. That's the game. I mean, to be a good councilman, you work for the people. You get a paycheck. You get a paycheck from the city of Dallas. But you don't work for Dallas. That's a really strange concept. When I got elected and I go down there, you go into your council office and you have your council staff and you do all the things as if you're a city employee. But you don't work for the city. You have to remember that. And if you do it well, you communicate to the constituents, to the people. Look, I work for you. I listen to everybody. I don't pick just some of you, one neighborhood, one color of a hat. I work for you, and I will make sure that you get the city services delivered that you deserve. Some councilmen are a little bit more activists, and they actually pursue more agenda items that aren't in the public interest, I don't think, because they're really just chasing, they're tilting at windmills for things that maybe kind of feed their voter base, but they don't really improve your quality of life. For all Dallas people, but you get that there's a handful of people on council right now that are activists first. I'm more of a manager first. I am a get things done person. I am not the kind of guy who's just going to be an activist, and I win some votes and I lose some votes based on that. But that's, I think, the job.
Yeah, you talk about what someone's intent is going to be when they're on the council, and it's usually pretty clear when being on the city council is a stepping stone to some later greater political office. Yeah. Because to your point, it becomes a lot more grandstanding, a lot more doing things so that I know my name, you know my name. So I want to transition away from speaking specifically about being on the city council and the sort of overall, and talk about your race in particular.
Yeah.
Would you mind telling our audience a little bit more about District 6, sort of maybe different challenges in District 6 versus, where were you, District 14? Where were you
District
before?
14. So District 14 is mainly downtown, uptown, and a good portion of East Dallas. And District 6 is more of West Dallas. And it is interesting. There's a lot of single-family neighborhoods in both districts, a lot of the similar demographics. In terms of the northern part of District 6, southern part of District 6 has a heavy Hispanic population. I used the word friction earlier, and there's a interesting comparison. In District 14, the biggest challenge you have is the difference between the entertainment areas, Greenville Avenue, Uptown, and so on, and the people who live there. So you've got residential and entertainment, and where they touch, you have crime, you have trash, you have homeless, you have all these things that kind of come together where those two disparate kind of groups touch, entertainment and residential. Mm-hmm. District 6 doesn't really have the entertainment as much. You've got the design district, which is similar, I think, to Uptown, a lot of high rises and entertainment oriented things, but you don't have single family neighborhoods back in there. And then you go a little bit north, and what you get is a lot more of the single family neighborhoods close to concrete batch plants and industrial. Like I said, my warehouse is over there. So you still have the same friction. The friction's different, though. You get to Bachman Lake, and you get to Northwest Highway, and up in there, and you've got where used to be the strip clubs, and you've got Harry Hines, and used to be a bunch of chaos over there, and it's getting a little better, but it's still some rough areas in there. Sure. But is it residential and other, whatever it is? And so how do you manage the quality of life for the residential people and the business interests, how they can actually generate a legal business and function and even thrive? So it's the same concept of how to navigate the two different groups and actually everybody kind of win. District 6 has a lot more crime than District 14. It has a lot more trash. It has homeless encampments. I mean, it's kind of funny. I mean, where I live, there's a homeless encampment right at Northwest Highway and Webb Chapel Marsh right in there.
Yeah.
And it's there all the time. And it's been cleaned up once in the last 6 months or something. It's right back the next day. And you go a mile east and you get in District 13 and you get Midway and there's nothing there. It's clean, it's nice. And so there is disparate representation about certain things like that I don't think is fair. I think that District 6 has a lot of room for improvement. I think that representation has been selected. It has not been universal throughout the district. It's a 40 square mile district, so it's bigger than my old district, which is 14 miles. So a lot more area to cover. A lot of areas kind of get lost in the mix. So it's very challenging to cover a district that big. But there's a lot of opportunity for improvement, and it's kind of exciting.
So just some of the specifics of your race before we start talking about the issues. As I understand it, there is no incumbent in your race. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, Omar Narvez, I served with him on council. He was there for 8 years. He's termed out. Before him was a lady named Monica Alonso. She was there for 6 years. I know her fairly well. She's running again this cycle. There's 8 of us running. I think there's a write-in too, so I think there might even be 9 if you count that. So it's a lot of people running, and it's a very low turnout district. I mean, it is 1,000, 1,200, 1,400 people. So everyone's kind of chasing those same voters, and the model is to think that somehow or other that the voter universe can be expanded to be more like a Preston Hollow, East Dallas, Lakewood, places like that where you have 10 or 12,000 voters. That's problematic. It's always a challenge to get new voters. And the fantasy is that you can get them. So we're all chasing the same voters, trying to expand the universe a little bit. There's some good people running. I mean, I like some of them. So there are very few people have experience. There's a lot of people who just want to do it because they're passionate, kind of like what I was in 2013. They want to do it because they care about it. They think they can do it. But I can tell you that city council, it is not like being on the Crime Watch board. It is, I was interviewed early on in my term. I was like, okay, you've been here for a while. What have you learned? Is it like drinking out of a fire hose? And I said, no, it's like drinking out of 2 fire hoses. I mean, the amount of information you have to absorb is incredible. A good friend of mine's mom was the mayor of Plano a long time ago. And he told me, Dave, you're going to get a briefing book every Friday. It's 500 pages. Oof. Of course, that was a long time ago. Now you don't get a briefing book, you get an email. But it is the amount of stuff you have to know and be ready for council meetings and your committee meetings. Council meetings are every Wednesday. You have committee meetings, whatever committees you're on Mondays and Tuesdays. You got to be prepared. And you just don't show up. I mean, you have to know everything about drainage and roads and infrastructure and budgeting. And it's weird. Now that I've done it all, I drive down the street and I'm like, oh, I know exactly what happened to that building. And I know why that road, I know where it floods. I know why the traffic signals are doing what they're doing. When you just know things when you've been there for a while and you've read it all. Some people, and honestly, some councilmen don't read it. So it is what it is.
I see that a lot in my line of work representing cities, and Dallas
Sure.
Dallas meets a lot more, right? I mean, there's a lot going on in Dallas, and to your point, yeah. I mean, I think I think that's one thing, and I kind of want to, maybe since you brought that up, take a bit of a step back to a comment you made earlier, talking about how you as a city councilman, you represent the voters. You don't work for the city.
Right.
But then the city is its own thing. Like it is its own entity with its own wants and needs. Would you mind sort of explaining how those two things have to cohabitate, or maybe there is some natural frictions between what the city wants for the good of the city, its own self, versus the people that live in the city?
Yeah, this is a dangerous question because a lot of neighborhoods really believe in the single member district concept. The city of Dallas used to be at-large councilmen, and so it was pretty much all North Dallas councilmen 30, 40 years ago. And then, of course, there were some court cases that kind of changed all that. So now you have representation that is local rule, if you will. And that's good because it makes the councilman focus on specific areas more than just the city as a whole. But you have to figure out how the city as a whole functions. Public safety is a great one, right? We're going to fund all the police, and police have to go into all 14 districts, but I want the police in my district, and I want the homeless encampments in my district, but they have to be addressed citywide. And so you have to balance all of this. And unfortunately, it's a challenge for the city government too, because city government has to placate the councilman. So my first job as a councilman is to represent my district. I then go to the city staff and I go, hey, I want this. 13 other councilmen say that they want it in their district. Mm-hmm. So then city staff has to make decisions on who they're going to use their resources on. And if they get it right, they don't get fired. If they get it wrong, the council will turn on them. And so at the highest level in city government, they're politicians too. I mean, they got to make sure that 5, 6, 7 councilmen are always on their side, or you're going to get rid of the city manager or the city attorney or the city secretary, different people, or even the assistants. I mean, if a staffer gets on the wrong side of enough councilmen, it's all bad. So they're political creatures, and you've got to balance that too. So on councilmen, you've got to figure out how to get 8 votes on council, and then you got to figure out how to get stuff from staff in a way that they can preserve their jobs and do what's best for the city. And I think there's a third layer to it too, and that's kind of how I looked at it. Is there are things that the city needs to do that maybe your district may not be the first focus. Maybe it benefits South Dallas a little bit more than North Dallas or whatever it is, but it's better for the city. And that's been a real challenge. The thing that my fantasy, if I was going to be on council for 8 years and I was working on it pre-COVID, is everybody I'm sure has seen that our traffic signals always go out whenever there's a storm. Yes. And we've got traffic signals going back to the 1950s. We have about 1,500 of them in the city. Again, these things when you're on council. They're very expensive, by the way. And they're not integrated. So when they're flashing, it's because they have a circuit board on the actual traffic signal. So what happens after a storm, the ones that are flashing, we have to send out guys to the individual intersections, 1,500 of them, and reset the box. If they were actually all upgraded, you could have a central command downtown, and you could reset the whole thing from downtown. It's going to cost about $300 million.
Wow. That number shocks. I mean, that number just seems really high.
It's crazy. Integrate. It's $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, depending on what intersection it is and how many lights you got to have. I mean, it's a big deal.
Wow.
So here's me, right, thinking outside the box. I'm like, we're putting 25 million or so into traffic signal, upgrading them. And so we do a handful every year.
Sure.
And so this one gets fixed and that one gets fixed. And whichever councilman is arguing the best for staff to get the resources, you kind of get them into your area. But I thought, everybody, it kind of bitches about traffic. And I thought, well, we're spending a lot of time on climate action. The city is really big into climate action because we have a heat map. The city is having more concrete, less grass, fewer trees. And so there's a heat map problem. There's a congestion problem. There's a road degradation problem. Mm. And I thought, there's federal funds for this. There's federal funds not to fix our traffic signals, but there's federal funds to reduce your heat map. And there's federal funds on climate action. And there's federal funds for pollution reduction. And a lot of our pollution and the heat comes from idling cars.
Yeah.
They're sitting at these traffic signals, not when they're flashing, right? But just traffic in general. So the flashing is from storms, but in general, they're not integrated. So you could actually improve traffic flow. You could reduce your heat map. You could reduce pollution. You could get an efficient working of the city if you replaced all of your traffic signals at one time and have them centrally controlled. Efficiencies in every way. I love that.
Yep.
I mean, so that's what I was working on. My staff was working on, and then COVID hit, and it kind of got thrown to the side. It would have taken years and years and years to get there. But man, it's my dream. The city would be amazing if you could do that. I mean, and then I thought the smartest thing, the small little way of doing it is from like Turtle Creek to Love Field, like down Lemon Avenue. Like, there's about a dozen traffic signals. Lemon is always torn up. It's terrible. It's 3 different council districts. Like, if we could just fix those, that one artery, maybe not the whole city, but that one artery, all of a sudden you got traffic patterns that are moving really fast in that area. And that's how you approach problems. You say, well, if I don't have the money for it because of this, maybe I can look at it from a different angle and find the money and get it fixed, and everybody wins.
If you had told me at the start of the day that I would hear an impassioned plea for replacing road, traffic signals in my day, I didn't think I would. That's
I tell
sort
you,
of that's sort of the refreshing local government city type of stuff, right?
it'll
'Cause
change the city. It'll change the city. And then if you think long term with AI and driverless cars and all the ride sharing and integrated traffic signals that can now communicate with these cars, and all of a sudden it's the future staring at you, and it starts with integrated traffic signals.
Is that going to be on your billboard? Or are we going to start seeing?
Oh man, the problem with local politics, I don't think there's any votes for it. It's still my passion.
David Blewett for integrated traffic signals.
I mean, I've got stupid ideas all the time. The second one I want is trash. I mean, there's litter everywhere, and I think the city can't do it. So I have this idea of take 5. Everybody walks their dog, take a trash bag with you, pick up 5 pieces of trash. If you did that after a month or two, you'd be amazed how little trash there'd be. And you go, oh my gosh, I couldn't pick up 5 pieces of trash because it's all gone. I'm like, congratulations, you just won.
Yeah. I mean, that's how a Better Dallas, our first community service activities, we're doing trash cleanups in South Dallas.
Yeah.
There was
all that trash ends up in the water system. It all ends up, it clogs everything. It just get it out of the streets and all the waterways.
Oh, don't we know it? So we do a monthly trash cleanup at White Rock Lake.
Oh yeah,
right? I mean, it all ends there at White Rock, and it was a cool program that we were doing to start off. I don't think it's going on anymore, but there was a young man that was working with code compliance at the City of Dallas and DPD. Right. They'd identify a neighborhood that was in particular need of a cleanup.
Yeah.
Code guys would be out there, police would be out there handing out supplies for volunteers to come just clean up this block, clean up this area, and move on to another place the next month.
Yeah, that's another thing about the idea. There's 13,000 employees in the city of Dallas, but a lot of them are cops, of course. There's a lot of employees, but there's a lot of departments. And quite frankly, a lot of the things that we expect city government to do for us, maybe if more of our citizens were engaged, it could be helpful. And I think litter is one. I think Crime Watch is another. I mean, seeing the Crime Watch integrate with extended neighborhood patrols and DPD, that integration and the help of it's like public-private for trash, public-private for public safety, we can enhance what the city officials do.
Now, you talked about sort of the representing your district. What particular challenges does District 6 face that you want to focus on?
It's going to be about housing. I mean, it's all kind of the same thing, but affordable housing is a weird term. Everybody uses it right now, but what it really means is we're short on workforce housing. District 6 has a lot of workforce people, and housing is a big problem in Dallas in general. So, I mean, I'm big on building more. I'm a supply and demand guy, so we need more housing of all kinds. Part of how good housing is taking existing neighborhoods that have been kind of left behind. A lot of it's because of trash, and a lot of it's because of public safety. So if you can clean up the trash, clean up public safety, all of a sudden the neighborhood becomes more desirable. Hey, now you got some families moving in. Hey, now you got some kids. Let me tell you, as a dad, when you get dads out there with little kids on bicycles, crime goes down. Oh, yeah. It just does. So it all kind of integrates into finding a neighborhood that has been abandoned in the last 20, 30 years for a lot of reasons. Trash, police, building, remodeling, getting people so they want to live here. And then I was a public school guy. All my kids are in Dallas public schools. And so if the kids go to the public schools, you're engaged in your neighborhood and you kind of know your neighbors, and that gets even better. So it's all about growing the neighborhood together. It's about housing. It's about having neighborhoods that people want to live in again. And you're seeing it. The East Dallas has done it for 30, 40 years. West Dallas is behind. We have a long way to go. South Dallas, and particularly North Oak Cliff and places like that, have done a good job, and it's going to grow south a little bit better, but it's going to take a while. But District 6 has a lot of opportunity to improve neighborhoods.
So as a city council person, I mean, generally when we hear city council people talk about affordable housing, their solution is give developer tax breaks to incentivize new apartments or new whatever. It's refreshing to hear, hey, we already have housing stock. People just don't want it. We need to fix it up. Yeah. As a council member, what levers can you pull on to sort of revitalize some of these neighborhoods like you're talking about?
Well, the city of Dallas, the permitting office has been a problem for a long time, and so it's getting better, but I worked on that while I was there. And it really is, there's a mindset amongst a lot of developers, and I have friends that are builders, and they just don't want to be in the city. They think it's too hard. So quite frankly, if you had more builders coming in, looking at neighborhoods, getting their zoning in place, getting their permitting in place, having the city do infrastructure, that they can actually build homes that they can sell. Right? They got to make money on this deal. And the city of Dallas has they say we're short 20,000 homes. We're short a lot more than that. But we're going to have to incentivize the developers and builders that want to play in Dallas. And that's the city's role. It is. And it's public safety, it's infrastructure, but it is the permitting office. My business is selling, it's click vinyl flooring to contractors mainly. And so I know all these guys. And a lot of them, they come in from all over the Metroplex. Most of them are not doing deals in the city of Dallas. And I ask them why all the time, and they want to, but there's just not a lot of inventory. So we're going to have to convince them that they can make money by going in these neighborhoods, remodeling them, selling them, and having families live there. So it's a permitting thing, it's a public safety thing, and it's about neighborhood by neighborhood, making it so it's more desirable that people want to live here. Because District 6 has other things going for it. It's centrally located, really, call it West Dallas, but it's really central. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of it's right around Love Field, it's along Stemmons, and so it's kind of the central part of the west part of Dallas. And people just want to live there. I mean, they really do. And so we've got to create the environment that there is housing stock that they can actually buy, and they will do it.
So, Kyle, I'm extremely interested in your feedback from that, given that that's exactly your line of work. What would what does that look like for you as somebody that's investing and rehabbing and selling houses?
Yeah, I mean, exactly what he said. I think the bigger builders, they don't even I mean, obviously they'll take a tax break if they can get it. But literally, if the city would just make the process of letting them do what they need to do, just, hey, here are the rules, here's the code, and be able to get in contact with someone. You call up the zoning, you're going to be on hold for a while. No one can ever give you a straight answer. The paperwork is a nightmare. And it's really just holding costs that drives them out. If all that was fixed, they would come back in droves.
I think they would.
There's been a big thing about the zoning and everything like that. I mean, that's just something for the neighborhoods to work out. But like in your area, I think you're right about the, flipping has still generally been, people still do it, but they do it because they feel they can get by with renovating a home without ever going to the city. That's the dirty little secret. So
sad but true.
Yeah, so when they're looking at the house, like, hey, do I have to do too much to the outside? Because if I do too much to the outside, code enforcement can drive by and hem me up pretty good. And they would, they have.
You just lost a month, you lost 2 months, you lost money.
Yeah, and if you don't have to do that, those homes will get flipped. The other ones just lay there and get worse and worse and worse.
Yeah. So that's part of it. The other thing that I did when I was on council, I'm a big believer in it. Housing affordability isn't just supply and demand of creating new housing stock. It's also property taxes. There's 5 taxing entities, and the backdoor property taxes, because of valuations, are pricing, particularly seniors. It's just pricing people out. People have been in their house 10, 20, 30 years. Their property taxes have doubled, tripled. City services haven't doubled or tripled. So that's, I proposed and we passed when I was there, marginal tax rate decreases. It helps a little bit. It sends a signal that we're on your side. But it's Dallas County, and it's the Dallas Independent School District, and it's Parkland. There's other entities that need to do the same thing. Everybody pushes this idea of zero cost or baseline budgeting. This idea that the city should get the same amount of money that it got last year and have to fight for additional sources of funds. And Austin has kind of done some things to kind of put limits on that. And I like the idea of holding down the increases on property taxes. And I support any way that would do that. And that would include lowering even from a 10% homestead cap to a 5%. I mean, even 10% is a lot of money. 5%, I'd probably get in trouble for this. I would even put a cap on non-homestead properties. I just don't think it's fair that somebody's at, we talk about there's no rental stock. Okay. So I'm renting a house for $2 or $3 grand a month, and they're building single family homes next to it. And the value goes up 100 grand, 200 grand. And the owner of that has no cap, and he has his tax bill goes up 3, 4, 5,000 in 1 year. Mm-hmm. He has to pass that along in rent. So your rent just went up $300, $400, $500 a month.
I'm living that, right? I rent the house that I'm in. So I see that, and I this is a conversation I have with everybody that talks about just wanting to limit homestead. I'm like, yeah, I rent. Like, this is my homestead. I live here. but I have no protections. And so those rates, those appraisals can go up however much they want to. And yeah, like I don't blame my landlord for increasing my rent when that happens. Like, what else can you do?
They get squeezed, and if they can't make their mortgage payments, then they sell those little rental houses and they become big McMansions that everybody complains about. So we're losing our rental stock because people that want to own rental properties are being priced out because of these tax increases. So that's actually an Austin problem more than a Dallas problem, but it's something I've been down to Austin. I've testified before Ways and Means about this issue. And I'm a believer that we're going to have to figure out how to hold down property tax increases, or we're going to drive everybody out of the city except for the rich people.
Yep.
Okay, so you mentioned something earlier that I would like for you to kind of educate our audience on. You talked about there being 5 different taxing entities.
Right.
Would you mind breaking that down and explaining what you mean by that?
Well, if you get to look at your property tax bill, what you'll see is that you don't get just taxed by the city, right? So you get taxed by Dallas Independent Schools, you get taxed by the county, you get taxed by the community college district. I'll lose my train of thought. Parkland and the city.
Yep.
So, add them all up, and it's 2.4, 2.5. It was 2.73. I think it's low. I have to add up the 5 to come up with it. Mainly because Dallas Independent School District got some funding resources from Austin that allowed them to drop theirs quite a bit. The city has gone from, I think, 78 cents down to, I think it might be under 70 cents now. So it's come down a little bit. But anyway, you add it all up, and it's a real tax burden. And
even if they drop the percent or the cents per hundred, it's the value just keeps climbing.
Yeah, the value's been going up I didn't look at it for this year. Well, I guess we'll find out in June or so, but it's been roughly 10% a year, 9%, just like clockwork.
Yep.
In some neighborhoods, a lot more than that.
You talked earlier about, I guess, easing the regulatory or streamlining permitting, or however you want to, whatever name you want to give the baby. What can you practically do as a city council person to improve that process? Is it just putting pressure on those departments? Is it passing an ordinance that sets deadlines or requirements? I mean, what's the solution to that problem?
Well, like I said, the city council only has a handful of people that directly report to them that they can fire, and you can't fire them by yourself. You got to have a majority or sometimes supermajority to fire the city manager. So what the city council does is it holds staff accountable. So what you do is you listen to the people, listen to your employers, the public that you work for. You come up with your priorities that will meet their needs as best as possible, and then you work on city staff. And if you're a good councilman, I again go back to my conversation with Philip Kingston. He thought he had to threaten and browbeat city staff to get things done. I actually had a different philosophy, and I think I was more effective in telling these guys that I was a partner. And look, I represent the people. People want this. I'll be with you on these things, but I need something here. And I was pretty happy with my staff support and what they would do for me when I asked. Rarely was I turned down if the resources were there. I mean, most staff are looking to do their job, and they're looking for allies on council. They're not looking for enemies. So that's what you do is you work with the staff and you encourage them. This is a priority. You get a few other councilmen to come with you. You get 2 or 3 councilmen, and next thing you know, you've made progress. And I'll give you an easy example. So the convention center is not in District 14, but it was closed during COVID. And there was a push to kind of reopen it. So I had a friend of a friend that was a marketing guy for this car auction. And he reached out to me and said, look, we did a car auction, I think in Tennessee or something, and we can do this. It's distance, it's not that many people. And so I went there, and I went there with Chris Kleinman, Chad West. There were 3 or 4 of us that went there and looked around at everything at the convention center. And we came back to city staff and said, we want to open it up. And they said, oh, we can't do it. And I said, no, we want to open it up. So then reached out to city manager, said, look, we can do this. Here's what they're doing over there. There's 5 of us that want this. They opened it up. Just kind of
So, I mean, and all I have to say as a resident, that's a concern that I have. You know, talk about the city as a whole is, Dallas is such a large city to be city manager managed.
Mhm.
Do you have any thoughts about, the pros and cons and changing that sort of, more mayor managed or council managed or anything along those lines?
All of them have problems. You go look at Chicago and New York and Boston, some of these big cities that have wards and have strong mayors and what they look like, and the corruption and graft is, significant. I don't see a lot of corruption and graft, honestly, on council because of how it's done. No councilman has enough power to really accumulate to be that corrupted. If you look at the guys who've gone to jail, they've gone to jail for pennies. It's not real corruption when I would like Chicago or Boston. I think the city manager system actually works pretty well. I think that if we had a strong mayor system, just based on who votes and demographics, go back to red hat, blue hat, 2-to-1 Democrat, Republican, whatever you look at. I mean, the city, you'll have a mayor's race that would change the city in ways that we really don't understand what that means.
Yeah.
Right now, funds are distributed fairly equally because 14 councilmen are fighting for funds. You have councilmen who are largely dependent on their district to do the best job they can. You go to a strong mayor system, and all of a sudden now, the areas that vote will have power to run the city. And I already know how the story is going to end. I know it's be North Dallas money buys South Dallas votes, and it will not be what people think it is. So actually, I like the city manager system. I think it's honest, as honest as you're going to find, and I think it's pretty efficient too.
Well, so what would you say in response to people that complain that really you have an unelected person running the city, which takes, some of the authority away from voters to actually control how the city functions?
You do. And my compromise would be similar to what we did in this last election, where there are citizen-led changes to our charter, which could empower council a little bit more, because I think that council has some power, but I think it should have more. Because yes, we can fire the city manager and the city auditor and the city attorney and these different people, but it's hard to do it. And again, I told you the city staff, they're politicians too, and so they're always trying to find allies. If they can get 5, 6, 8 people that like them, then they're pretty safe. There's got to be a better way to have more accountability with the professionals at the city. And that means empowering city council with more power. It's changing the charter's hard, and it would take a while to do it, but I would support that more than just a strong mayor system.
Okay, that's interesting. So maybe stay with the city manager managed system, but with increased power for accountability or oversight by the city council.
By council. Yeah. Because I believe in representative government. I believe in the Republican nature of America and of local politics. I think direct democracy is a neat idea, but it's probably, what did Thomas Jefferson call it? He called it mob rule. So, I do think that the idea of having a council represent you and hold staff accountable is a workable system, but I don't think council has enough power.
What you talked about you'd have to change parts of the charter. What are some of the things that would need to be changed about it?
Well, you have to add it. You have to, whatever line items you want to give specific power to council, you'd have to add it.
There are any areas that jump out where you think the council, needs more authority?
I'd have to think more about it because, quite off the top of my head, I'd say we'd have the ability not just to fire the 4 or 5 direct reports, but some way of holding the assistant city managers and people like that. Because the idea is, let's say you wanted to fire the police chief. You can't. You'd have to fire the city manager before you can fire the police chief. Well, I'm not sure that that's the best system here. The police chief is a pretty powerful position, but all he has to do is make the city manager happy. I'm not sure that really is. I think council should have more of a role in that. So, and that's 2 levels below city manager. The police chief reports to an assistant city manager who reports to a city manager. So that's just one example. And there might be some other people that run roads or sanitation or different elements of the city that I'd like to be able to say, hey, I really want this. And I don't want to have to go to the city manager and have the city manager ask you to do it or tell you to do it. But it would be department by department, and it's a very tricky thing. And unfortunately, the lawyers are going to have to get involved.
Doesn't sound unfortunate to me.
Yeah, Chris is
Sure.
excited.
Now, you talked a little bit about the chief of police.
Mhm.
You know, we have that hiring process. We're in the midst of that hiring process at the moment with the city. What are your thoughts about delaying the ultimate decision on that until a new council is elected?
It's
Or takes
the
off
new council. The new council's close, and the way it works is, council. I was involved in the last police chief hiring. Garcia was my choice, and I pushed him, and I was very happy with him as our chief. Looking at the candidates, I know two of the candidates that are in this round, and I like them. And I honestly don't. I'm not sure which one I would vote for at this point. I didn't get to interview them, so I don't, know exactly where they are right now. So it's still a city manager hire with consultation from council. And I'm not sure that I would support the idea that council gets to directly hire the police chief. There should be accountability, but, again, 14 different bosses, it gets a little problematic.
Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking more along the lines of, it being a matter that the citizenry, not that they get to select the council member, the chief of police, but, if that's an interview process that's ongoing, should kind of like we did with the Supreme Court, right? With the Trump administration, where it's like, hey, we don't want a lame duck president picking the next Supreme Court justice. That there needs to be the voters have a chance to say what they think. Should that be something that happens now, or do you think it's best for the current council members who have been going through this interview process to make those recommendations?
Yeah, I think it depends on the timing, right? It's a calendar thing. I mean, we are so close to having this election that I could make an argument that, it makes sense to bring in the new council. There's going to be X number of new voices and some visions on this thing. And so if it's a month away, what's the harm? I mean, Igo is doing a pretty good job as the interim. I disagree with him on some issues, but I know him personally. I know him to be a good man and a good leader. So I think he's doing fine for the next month. And I don't see the harm in delaying it. I do think it'd be interesting because it might change the dynamics of my race. If I took a position publicly on who I wanted to hire as the police chief, that might influence, some voters for me. And maybe that's a good thing, but I'd have to think about it a little bit more because it might be overstepping our bounds a little bit.
Because there certainly have been, I guess, other candidates that have been a little bit more rah in favor of wait, let us have a chance to say, which I guess is an understandable perspective for somebody to take. But, having not been a part of the interview process with a lot of these candidates, I just sort of wonder what base of knowledge an incoming council would have without restarting the process.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I mean, it wouldn't be a month delay. It would be a 6-month delay. You'd have to have interview process and go through all the vetting and there's no time either. The way the calendar works is you got the election in May, you got the runoff in June, you got council break for the summer, you come back in August and you're in budget. And I mean, it's probably best to get it over with.
So another big question that usually comes up around council elections is, infrastructure, streets, wastewater, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Are those issues that are in 6, or is that there's less of an issue over there?
It's God. Unfortunately for me, I'm an honest guy, and I've been on council, so I know too much. I know how much we spend on roads. I know how much we put into the bond to enhance how much we spend on roads, and I know how much money we need to spend. We have an RCI road condition index. So every road is graded. Every road is on a list in terms of how we're going to fix it and when we're going to pay for it. The last I'd heard, it was $2 billion in deferred infrastructure just on roads. We spend about $200 million a year. And every year that goes by, we have more needs. So it's going to be a constantly chasing the rabbit or something. So the answer is it's never going to end. We don't have the money. We don't have it in revenue. We won't have it in a bond to fix the roads. So we're going to be constantly repairing potholes and then fixing individual roads that the RCI, the condition index, drops to a point where we decide to go ahead and tear it out and put in a new road. I don't have a great answer that isn't just kind of shining people on, because it's a lot of money and there's a lot of needs.
So another popular sort of topic right now is doging things. So of course there is the call to doge Dallas, or doge the city government.
Mm-hmm.
Having served on the council before, being a little bit familiar, obviously, with how the sausage is made, what are your thoughts about doging the city of Dallas and what people should expect if something like that were to happen?
Well, I brag that I know certain things, and I'm going to speculate because I'm going to be wrong specifically, but I'll be right generally. City of Dallas has about 13,000 employees. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I forget the date, we had roughly 6,500 employees. So the city staff, the employees have roughly doubled, and the city of Dallas has gone up from like 1 million, 1.1 million to like 1.2 million. So now I'm no genius, but I'm kind of a linear guy. If we've doubled our staff, I would think we would have doubled our population.
Or at least doubled the speed, cut the speed in half of getting permits issued or something.
Yeah, and the answer is, quite frankly, I'll blame the voters. You should never do it, but I'll blame the voters. Because the voters ask for things. They want homeless people figured out. So we're spending $5 million, now we're spending $25 million. And we have a senior dental program. And we have, all these different things that we do that people want. And so as we take the money from this bucket and put it in a new bucket, we're now having diminishing funds for the core things that we need to do. So it's not just doging, because a lot of these departments have been asked for. People want the city to do more things. But underneath all that, I'm sure, and I haven't studied it, but I'm sure there's a certain percentage of employees, and you could probably do exactly what Elon Musk is doing in DC. Find out how many people actually go in to work. Because when I was down there 6 years ago, it was packed. Parking lot's full. There's people out in the hallways. There's no room for desks, cubes, nothing. During COVID, because my district was so close, I was one of the few people going downtown. There might have been 200 people in the building when I was down there. And I was down there a lot because it was just easy for me to get there. Some council members never even came in. A lot of staff didn't come in because it was all remote work. So I go down there to file for council a few months ago, and some people are coming back, but it's largely empty still. There's still a lot of people doing remote work, and I'm not smart enough, and I'm not into the personnel enough to know how many of those people are doing a good job, doing a great job, how many people are duplication. I don't know, but I think in the environment that we live in right now, where we're trying to spend more on roads and public safety, that one of the things we have to look at is, you use the word efficiency, but we're going to have to reallocate resources. And that might involve certain departments just get downsized a bit and other departments get upsized. I think that's a normal part of government, and it needs to be done here as well as all across the country.
Part of that, you talk about the size of the government in the city of Dallas and the increase. One thing that I hear from voters a lot are concerns about the amount of debt that the city of Dallas is getting into, that it's one of the most in-debt cities in the country. Would you mind speaking on that?
Yeah. So we had about $100 million in debt service, out of our budget. And with this new bond, and that was at like a 3% interest rate. So, the way it works is we pay off the old bond with a new bond, and we have extra cash, and then we float it at market rates. So the market rates, I don't know, on municipal bonds right now, let's just say they're 7%. So we're going to pay interest carry $200 million a year on this new bond. And, I think that governments in general have gotten, intoxicated by the idea of, well, if we can't fund it through sales tax or from property taxes, Well, then we'll just float a bond and we'll pay for it that way. And I don't think people look long term. A $1.5 billion bond at 7% is really harmful. I mean, it squeezes other things out. So I would be, and you get in trouble, I mean, I would be in favor of smaller bonds. I would have been in favor of paying off the old bond first. I mean, I think that we have to get our fiscal house in order. And I think there's a train coming at us that we can't even see. We're supposed to hire a whole bunch of officers. Each officer costs over $100,000 each. You want to hire 600 officers, you need $60 million.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of money. It's actually more than that. I was at $60,000 salary, so now it's 72,000. So it might cost us $70 million to hire 600 officers every year. And if we want to do that, how are we going to pay for that? I mean, sales tax. I mean, we're making a lot of money on sales tax. Property taxes, we already talked about that. So if we're gonna spend all this money that we're mandated to spend, there's got to be some changes made.
Yeah,
I'm in finance. I run my own business. I run my budget. I know how it works. And I mean, I am not hearing much from the city about the budgetary problems that are coming, and there's going to be some big ones.
So how do you get out from underneath those bonds? You said your preference would be to pay down the bonds or pay off the bond. How do we do that?
Well, it's too late because it's already passed. So I mean, we're just it's placing them now. But so the people vote for the bonds, we get the bonds, and there's the money. And then you got to sell them, and then we got to pay them. But it's just kind of a continual thing. It just seems like we're on track. Every 5 years or so, we have a new bond. We just do it. And there's some bonds that we never even use all the money. I mean, when I was in council, we had bonds that went back 10 or 15 years, and you have extra money left over. Well, there's $1 million left over. There's $5 million left over. And so everything reallocate resources, and I'd have $50,000 that I could blow on traffic signals or whatever I thought was important as like found money. But all the bonds are allocated specific to specific projects. Mm-hmm. So it's not like it's free money. We have to spend it on parks. We have to spend it on roads. It's not fungible. You can't move it from one bucket to the next. So that's a problem. So if they don't have the ability to spend the money, it just sits there. I would want them all cleaned up. I would want one bond, and I want as low interest rate as possible.
And did you say what is our debt payment on our current bond?
Oh, it was about $100 million. I have to go look at it and see where it is right now, but I'll bet you the new one's going to be $200.
Is that over the life of it, or
no? It's annual.
And okay, and how much did you say we spend on streets every year?
$200 million. Well, it's 100 plus million plus the bond. We pull 100 million plus out of the bond, so it's 250 every year on all roads. Yeah.
So we're paying in debt. We're paying a debt payment that is equal to what we're doing to take care of our streets.
Yeah, but the city is no different than a household. People use credit cards for to buy now, pay later. It's just get it now and pay for it later kind of thing. And so if it's an investment, I think you can make an argument that a bond makes sense. But if you're using it for things that won't last very long, that's not an investment now, that's consumption. Mm-hmm. So we've got to be very careful on how we spend this money and make sure we get a return on it. We used to do that. I mean, we used to spend money on water rights and infrastructure that we'd have these roads that would generate business. So there's ancillary effects from different things we'd invest in. And now we're doing road repair. I mean, road repair is not going to generate business.
That sort of is consistent. We had Jose Rivas on. He talked about bonds, and he was like, "Yeah, these are for big capital projects, not for your maintenance and operations of the city."
Yeah. So we're putting a bunch of money into parks, and I love parks. But I mean, I'm just not sure that, outside of acquiring a new park, which we've done, I'm not sure a bond should be used for anything with a park. Yeah.
Within your race, talking about a lot of issues, and I really appreciate your knowledge and being so candid about a lot of these sort of things.
Just don't share this too widely. I don't want to get in trouble. So.
Well, no, I mean, here's the thing for me is like you seem like a immensely practical candidate. You know, I mean, I feel like so many people in the midst of running for office at all levels start pandering, right? They start, you know, just becoming a mouthpiece for certain things because they're trying to, you know, I guess appeal to certain groups. I haven't really gotten a lot of that from you.
Right. Well,
Within
maybe
your
I should do a better
race.
job of that.
No. Please,
No,
you
because
know,
that's the first job of politics is to win. You know, and I always joke, if you don't win, you're just having a conversation.
well, great. That's my preface, as long as it was to set that sort of thing up. If you're a voter and you're in six and you're looking at the list of candidates,
Mhm.
what do you want people to know about David Blewett and why you're the right person to represent them in six?
Well, the answer is real simple. It's that I can hit the ground running. I know what the problems are. I know what the issues are. I don't have a steep learning curve. So council elections are 2 years, and I can tell you that it moves very fast. And along with the different breaks that you don't have a lot of time to get things done. So it's an open seat. So everybody that's going to be running is going to have a learning curve. Everybody, and I will have the least learning curve. Having said that, go back to my background, and I'm genuinely passionate about the city of Dallas. I am living a life that is much better than I ever thought I would, and it is largely because I came to Dallas. I built my life here. My kids are smart. My kids are doing well. We've had a safe neighborhood that we've lived in, and you know it's kind of like pay it forward. And I just want to do it. I get all my friends saying all the time, you know, why would you do this, Dave? I mean, it's just, why would you do it? And even when I did it before, and it was so challenging and very frustrating at times, but it was also very rewarding. You know, I go to functions still, and people will come up to me and go, "You helped me on this thing," and then, honestly, I remember some of the things, and some of them I don't. But I love when somebody says to me, you know, I called your office and I talked to you, and you helped me with this, and I really want to thank you for that. Now I don't get a lot of that, but I get them every month or so. You know, a personal just still. I used to get a bunch. And that's very rewarding. It's also rewarding when I drive past something. One of my big things was the first thing I got put in place. It sounds kind of hokey. Was there was a is across Matilda over by my kids' elementary school, and it's in District 14, my old district. And I was on the SBDM committee, and so I knew that a lot of kids walk to school from north of the school, from west of the school, and east of the school. And Matilda is kind of like Greenville Avenue, and it's a fairly high traffic, you know, a lot of traffic, people speeding. And I'm like, well, why don't we have a lit up crosswalk? You know, so you can hit a light, flashing light, and kids can safely cross the street to get to school. I was told by my predecessor, oh, there's no money for it, you can't do it. Okay. So I get on council, 2 months later, we had a flashing crosswalk. If you want it, a lot of times you can get it. It just takes a councilman that pays attention, that listens, and actually will fight for your interests. And I really want every neighborhood to have that kind of safety, to have that kind of lifestyle, and I will work very hard on that. And I'm not going to disparage the other candidates. I mean, I know some of them pretty well. And if you asked all of them, we'd all say we want to support public safety or infrastructure, but how they do it is the difference. It's not just the learning curve; it's how they would get things done. Do they know how to do it? Can they prioritize? Do they understand how the sausage is made? Can you make it? It's not as easy as you think.
Well, I think that's as good of a place as any to leave. Strong plea.
Wrong
Plus, you
plea.
know, you can't really go wrong with talking about making sausage.
I love
Um,
sausage.
you
Yeah.
know, yeah, everything is sausage. I saw some meme about that the other day. It's like it doesn't matter what industry you're in, it doesn't matter what you do. At the end of the
Mhm.
day, everyone's making sausage in their own way.
Yeah. And I'm also an old football player. I mean, I'm kind of this guy that I think, yeah, you get things done. You four downs to get 10 yards, and so you just grind it out. Sometimes a victory is just a couple yards.
When you sort of talked about, you know, when it comes to the city, other than maybe somebody that's quite radical, everybody wants the same things for their city. The
Mhm.
the question is just a matter of what's your plan, right? Because
Right.
there's different ways you can go about it. And then do you have the ability to execute on that plan?
I'll go back to what I said about 8 votes and single member districts. I mean, you got to have 8 votes to get anything done at council. And I mean, some of your viewers might know I'm friends with almost everybody on council still. I've supported some of them that politically are a bit different than me, and I've had some people attack me for that. And I mean, that's just kind of the decision that I've made is, if I got to get 8 votes, quite frankly, I'm getting them where I can find them. I'm not looking to make an enemy with anybody on council. And I don't drop any names, but there's some guys that politically we are not aligned, but I can still go talk to them and I can still convince them, hey, I need this. And you can still get things done. But you got to get to 8 votes. I mean, that's the practical nature of this thing. I don't care what your ideology is. If you don't have 8 votes on council, you're not getting anything done.
That's a good way of putting it, especially, with the city the size of Dallas with all the different member districts and that sort of thing. Got to get to 8, race to 8.
It's a race to 8. I mean, there's, like I said, there's constituent services you can do individually, but citywide, you need 8 votes.
Perfect. Kyle, do you have anything you wanted to add? Any Kyle hot takes?
No, nothing I wanted to bring up. That was very informational, that's for sure. Another deep dive that we have.
A deep dive. Well, hopefully people are still awake as we talk about some of these things, right? I mean, city politics, man.
Well, the magic of the internet is you can cut it up and make it as interesting as you want to. But this is, I mean, look, this is the reason that we have this podcast, right? Is it's not a matter of like, we're not chasing headlines. It's not about vitriol. It's not about, taking outrageous takes to get, viral moments. It's, we want to talk to the subject matter experts. We want to talk to the candidates, and we want to fully inform people so that they can make an informed decision when they go cast whatever vote they're going to cast. Or, I mean, I don't know, a lot of what you talked about today, I hope informs people on how their city actually runs and functions, so they have a better idea about how they can be a part of it.
Yeah, I mean, that's ultimately my job. I said we're all chasing the same 1,000, 1,200 voters, but my hope is that I can give a message out to a broader voter universe that people maybe didn't have a candidate that they could follow in District 6 for the last 10 or 20 years that, they could support. But I'm a practical person, like you say. I'm a reasonable person, and I know how to get some things done. And so if there are people out there, and I see it when I talk to people that are cynical, like, you can't change anything. You can't make it better. I'm like, well, I'm trying to just get a couple of yards here, guys. Just trying to get a couple of yards. And if enough people think, well, if this guy's trying, I'll support him, then I'm going to win this thing. And if I don't connect, and if people don't think that I'm the guy that can make that difference, then I won't win. And that's our system.
Well, you talk about connecting. How can voters connect with you?
Connecting with me is simple. My email is the easiest in the world. It's my name, David, at my last name, at blewett.com, BLEWETT.com. And my website, of course, is my last name, Blewett, BLEWETT.com. So that's my website. That's my email. Reach out to me, ask for a sign. Anybody wants to donate, you can always use money. It's a low funding cycle. So every dollar counts. And trying to expand that voter universe, it just takes money. It just does. So money, support, signs, and most importantly, vote.
And as a reminder, when's the vote?
Early voting is April 22nd, and the election's May 3rd or 21st. May 3rd. So right around the corner. I mean, we're 2 or 3 weeks from early voting and then election day. So it is right here. And my signs, if you see my signs out there, we went ahead and put the election dates on the signs because so many people again, the turnout in District 6 is so low that you guys say, hey, I'm running and it matters. And they're like, well, when is it? November? I'm like, no, it's right here, right now.
Yeah, everybody thinks they're waiting for the future, but time is now. Get ready, go vote.
Time is now.
Well, David, thank you so much for joining us and sharing some of your expertise, some about yourself, and helping us inform voters with the upcoming election. Kyle, do you have any closing thoughts?
My only closing thought is I'd really appreciate if everyone liked, subscribed, and shared this. on their social media or to a friend or family. And like he said, just get out and vote. Everyone talks about how your vote doesn't count. This is where it's going to count the most. You have the most impact on a local election when no one else is showing up.
And in this district in particular, with such a low turnout, every vote is really going to count.
And what is sort of, one more time, just since we're talking about it now, the sort of outline of District 6? How does somebody know they're in 6?
It's south end is like I-30, like Singleton area, so West Dallas, west of the design district, following Stemmons on up. And then it crosses over Northwest Highway, north of Love Field, goes up into Midway Hollow and into northwest Dallas. And then there's a real interesting pocket, Cypress Waters. If you look at the map, it's kind of funny. It's connected by like a water pipeline. And it's mainly an apartment community around North Lake, but it's in District 6 too, surrounded by, all the suburbs. But it's there's voters out there, so anybody that's in Cypress Waters, I'll take your vote.
There you go. Well, if you're in one of those areas, look at David Blewett. If you're not in one of those areas and you still want to support, obviously, you can reach out to him, go to his website, donate money. But again, thanks for joining us. To our audience, thanks for joining us. We look forward to seeing you again next week as we continue to talk to different candidates for the Dallas City Council to get ready for that May 3rd election. Thanks.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.